Head over to Germany, where the German government has just presented a new Africa policy. Why was that necessary?
Well, the major reason, I guess, is that we simply have a new government in Germany for the past year. It's a more left-leaning government, and it wanted to revise the policy of its more conservative predecessor government. So this new policy places less emphasis on business matters and stresses more, for instance, what it calls a feminist policy, the attempt to promote women and to respect the interests and the role of women in society. And also aspects such as climate change, carbon neutrality and so on. All of these matters become more important. But also there are significant economic interests that play a role here. Germany recently disconnected itself from its major energy supplier, that was Russia, and it's now looking for new sources of energy, and Africa is a very promising market there, or rather a promising supplier, because Africa could supply a lot of clean energy, mainly solar power energy, but also hydroelectric and wind power, and it could help in producing clean hydrogen, which Germany really is looking for. And then there are questions such as raw materials, which could come from Africa, and also agricultural supplies from Africa, so significant economic interests as well.
What role do rivalries with other big international actors play, such as China and Russia?
Yes, I think here we need to mention especially China, which is regarded as having a major footprint in Africa, having established this in the last 10 years or so with its huge infrastructure projects, especially in rails and roads, but it also controls large parts of, significant parts of raw materials, of mining and so on in Africa. Germany feels that Chinese cooperation with African countries is not really on an equal footing. In Germany, one would describe this cooperation as fairly one-sided and as having given African countries money, basically, and led them into further debt. What Germany is offering is, it hopes for more equal partnership. It says that it wants to listen to African voices, wants to help African countries to get out of debt and to have a more just transition, is the word they use. In other words, to improve their economies in a way that is more long-lasting in terms of climate change, for instance, but also such issues as the role of women or social justice.
Now, some African commentators have welcomed help from China because it has very few strings attached, while help from the West is regarded as a neo-colonial in its insistence on human rights, for instance, or good governance. Now, does German help have some strings attached?
The German policy says that Germany wants to be a lot more attentive to issues of colonialism and neo-colonialism, that it wants to listen more carefully to what African critics have to say on this score. In other words, it wants to respect this criticism and in its cooperation make sure that these issues are dealt with. At the same time, it is saying that it would like to see its cooperation more in the framework of international organizations, or of multilateral organizations, for instance, in cooperation between the European Union and the African Union, or in initiatives taken by the G20 group of countries, or within the United Nations or the World Bank. At the same time, one has to say that these kinds of strings continue to be attached to German aid. There is still an insistence on good governance, on human rights, and Germany does say that it is not likely to cooperate closely with autocratic governments in Africa.
Now, Africa has a very young population that is also growing rapidly. How does that influence German Africa policy? Would you prefer only 3 questions?
That's seen both as an asset and as a problem, one has to say. As an asset in the sense that if Africa grows, if the young population in Africa gets educated well, stays in home countries and participates to the growth of those countries, then Africa could turn into a significant market for products from around the world, also from Europe, could be an economic powerhouse in many ways. On the other hand, At the moment, the situation is such that many youth in Africa do not have very good prospects in their own countries. That drives them into the hands of terrorist groups or makes them think about going to faraway places such as Europe to look for a better life. The hope would be that by helping African youth to improve their lives within their own countries or within the continent, these kind of movements towards terrorist groups or illegal migration to Europe could be in some sense stopped.